Influencers are now receiving so much backlash over their Shein positive videos, and people are pretty upset.
Followed by the hashtags and the discount codes. It's all wash, rinse, repeat, right? There's something else that's a bit of a trend on all of these Shein haul videos, and that trend is happening right down in the comments. Question upon statement upon bit getting dragged in the topic of how can a $4 dress be in any way sustainable for us or the workers?
I was taken on a trip, once in a lifetime chance, you would have done the exact same thing.
They are willingly walking into something that is an obvious PR stunt to then go and gaslight their audience. Oh, Shein's great. They're doing all these cool things. Did they make mistakes in the past? Sure, but no, ma'am. There is literally no way for a company like that makes that amount of profit. I think it was like $1 billion profit last year. There's no way for a company that big that makes that much profit and makes that many new products for such little amounts of money to exist with ethical business practices.
Hi everyone, it's me again, and Squish Gang is present. And today, we're gonna take a stroll down propaganda lane and discuss the kind of Shein factory trip along with other encompassing factors about the company allegedly in Minecraft and this sort of idea of influencers vouching for bigger companies on this like profound deep level besides just like doing sponsorships. Before we get into that, links, sources, ways to support the channel, including YouTube memberships, Patreon, any affiliate links to all that kind of stuff, as well as the links to today's sponsor, Scentbird, also will be down below, as well as anything on my face, including Every Jewels and Gerard Cosmetics, which are both having sales this week. The Every Jewels one might be over by the time I get this up, but the Gerard Cosmetics one should still be happening. And in honor of this sort of idea of, you know, trying to support more ethically, most of what I'm wearing on my face is indie brands, including the liner and the eyeshadow and stuff. The eyeshadow's Lethal Cosmetics. Use code GARBAGE, because that's Theresa's Dead's code. I don't have one. So if you're going to do that. But I also want to thank my YouTube members and patrons. Names on the screen. I'm so annoying. And then we have my usual disclaimer, which is if you're new to the Rhetoric of series, it is not necessarily a comprehensive historical deep dive on a person or subject, rather that we're going into an analysis and detailing everything in response to or in regards to argumentation, the processes that they take in order to respond to things. I've never actually done one of these on a company. I have done it on things broader than individuals, but at the same time, I'm still kind of like new to this whole aspect of tackling kind of something as complex as a company, a huge company like Shein and its functions within capitalism and all that kind of stuff. So bear with me. I also want to say that these are my opinions and everything I'm saying is alleged. And what we're actually going to do is I'm going to have a little allegedly counter on the screen throughout this entire video because I think I've written it in here like 50 times. So I just want to see what it gets to at the end of the day. We're not going to count the allegedly in Minecraft from earlier. We're going to start once the video actually starts. 3 parts of the video today. Part 1, what is Shein and why are they controversial? Part 2, Shein's propaganda factory tour. And part 3, I just have in quotation marks, there is no ethical consumption under capitalism. So those are going to be the 3 parts for today. And that is what I'm going to be talking about. Before we really get into the meat and potatoes, we're going to talk about the sponsor of today's video. I want to thank Scentbird for sponsoring today's video. Thank you very much. We really appreciate sponsors on the Mika's Rhetoric channel. Scentbird, if you don't know, is a monthly subscription service where you receive fragrances in the mail. Looks like this. And then you just unlock it by going like that. And then, so there's a selection of scents from designer brands as well as indie brands. And there are various types of fragrances from perfumes to colognes to unisex fragrances. These like really generous vials, right? And Scentbird lets you choose a new designer fragrance every single month for just $17 US. I'll put the Canadian conversion on screen as well. And you get to pick every month, so there's no surprises. And like, I know it's not obvious that I like fragrances because, you know, it's obvious that I like makeup because you see it on the channel all the time. But I'm actually like a huge perfume lady. I love smelling good. What's interesting about me specifically is like I really don't have a preference on the scents very often. You also get these like little cards that describe your scent with your notes and everything, which I think is really nice for people like me who just go, it smells good. And the scent's Casablanca. The kind of suede and the marshmallow, especially with the vanilla, it really balances it out. And I think this is like a very, very good scent. So this is Love Me, the Onyx perfume by 2. Hazelnut, peony, heliotrope, vanilla, and sandalwood. So it's got the vanilla and sandalwoody kind of scent like the other one, but it's very clean. Not soapy, but clean. It's like you're freshly showered and you're outside. It's like a very nice, like I would love, this would be one I would definitely wear out of the shower. So this is my favorite out of the ones they sent me. First off, look at this case. It's giving Barbie. It's giving Slay. It's like a nice like bubblegum pink. My light's kind of keying it out a little bit, but so this is L'Eau Réveillée d'Alma by Sisley. This one, y'all. So this one is cardamom, bergamot, iris, jasmine, and cedarwood. I've always been a huge jasmine gal. It smells grassy in like the best way possible. Like the way that I got this, and I immediately looked it up to buy a full-size bottle. So if you want to join Scentbird for some fun Slay scents, use code Mika for 55% off at checkout. And that's going to make it a little bit over $7 USD for the first month. Again, I'll put the conversion there for the Canadian ghouls. And this deal is available in the US and Canada. So thank you, Scentbird, so much for sponsoring, and let's get right into the video. So here we're in part 1. What is Shein and why is it so controversial? So Shein, for those of you who do not know, if you've lived under a rock for the past 3 years, is a fast fashion company that has redefined what it means to be fast fashion and what it means to consume. This hyper-consumerist company has an incredibly rapid production process that has removed any semblance of what used to be a long turnaround between the design process and the production process of an article of clothing. Shein specifically has less than a week-long turnaround for the initial designs, from getting it produced to shipped to sold. Now, I'm going to pull up this chart on screen, which is something that I had seen in many other videos, but also had discussed previously, weirdly enough, in a marketing class I took in my first semester of my undergraduate degree. But Zara and H&M were once considered to be the worst fast fashion companies as far as waste and overconsumption goes and amount of pieces produced per year. They were considered like the new trend of hyperconsumerism. I actually remember a presentation being done on the company Zara by some of my classmates in that class. That was back in 2019, and they were talking about how disastrous H&M and Zara were going to be in the long term. What's interesting with this is that after this time, Shein completely blew them out of the water. Like, if you can see on this chart, right, you got like H&M, Zara, and then like Shein just like blows them out. It's given the mix of the volume, low prices, and internet-based consumer purchasing ability, right? Because the thing with Zara and H&M is they cut a lot of profit out from having brick and mortar stores, plus their online commerce, plus et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Shein has a couple of pop-ups that show up once in a while, but it is primarily an e-commerce site. Given the incredibly low prices, along with the sheer volume of items being produced, people were beginning to question, how could Shein do it? And it turns out it kind of came down to the morals and practices of the company. Allegedly, there were alleged photos of the factories as well as the kind of conditions that they are working in. Again, I am stating that everything is alleged because I don't have legal money. Before we get into this kind of concept of balancing the sort of consumerist nature and the clothing production along with overconsumerism and a lot of these other things, we're going to first get into just a very brief history. If you want more details on Shein, I have a ton of stuff linked down below, from YouTube videos, TikToks, articles, etc. Shein was founded by someone known as Chris Xu in 2008 in China, which it started sort of as a cross-border e-commerce site with focus on marketing and didn't initially really start with a focus on textiles. This, I think, is pretty similar to Temu in that way, of this kind of marketplace, sort of Amazon-esque store. And yeah, it's interesting because we'll get into this concept of taking deals from brands like this before, but one of the influencers on the Shein brand trip was like, you would have done it too for a check as a defense, which I feel like by now we would know that's not a good idea. I've been offered many times to work with Temu and have not taken it. And we know that I don't get sponsors very often on this channel. Like, it's something that you kind of have to balance within your own integrity and your own moral compass. Over the years and over some span of time with some alleged sketchy business practices, Shein combined its use of marketing, rapid production rates, cheap textiles, and low prices to not only become one of the biggest clothing companies in the world, if not the biggest, rather one of the most profitable companies on earth. In order to establish ourselves appropriately in the foundations that I'm trying to bring forward in this video, as far as how we would critically think about Shein, I need to briefly explain the top 3 reasons why I think people speak out about Shein the most. I chose not only from the general consensus of people on social media, but also the things that I've seen Shein address specifically, whether directly or indirectly, and whether from themselves as a company or through the use of influencers. 1, alleged environmental impact. So the marketplace of Shein brings together 6,000 individual clothing factories under their label, allegedly adding anywhere from 2,000 to 10,000 individual styles daily into its app. This was a number taken from July to December 2021, as noted in the First Time magazine article linked down below. The amount of CO2 that is produced from the textile practices alone surpasses that of 180 coal-fired power plants, with a total of approximately 6.3 million tons of carbon dioxide. So while the fashion industry itself produces 10% of global emissions, Shein has pushed this wasteful industry beyond the scope of anyone's comprehension and what anyone could have ever conceived. The cheap fabrics made out of virgin polyester, which for those of you who don't know is made out of oil, does not hold up to wear or washing or any kind of difficult condition. The trendy nature of this brand and the production alone have allegedly created even more rapid consumerist cycle and trend cycle than ever seen before, and has made the industry as a whole more wasteful. Because the thing is that the clothes and the quality of the clothes doesn't really matter if you're not going to keep wearing them, if it is just for a very specific time. There are videos of people making like jokes about how they had the Shein print pants, how they had the cow print mirrors from 2020, and all these trends that they had to come to that in reality they did not like or care for. And we've all done that. You know, I bought like the nose vacuum to get the stuff out of my nose or, you know, other such silly things. But after a while, you kind of develop your own kind of sense of style and sense of what you like and what you don't like. And in that way, you can hopefully be more ethical and avoid falling for that trend cycle. Number 2, working conditions and alleged art theft. It is no secret to many, especially in a world like in the Western world, when you see the cost of production here. And I say that in the sense of why a lot of companies export production to other countries. Because if, let's say, everybody in the world was paid the same for production, there would be not much of a reason to do so overseas, especially in a country like Canada that is very, very plentiful as when it comes to its natural resources, that they would be able to obtain most of what they needed without having to do much work elsewhere. But the reason why things are produced in other countries is because of the difference in labor costs. Most would not be able to figure out how it would be possible to have so many different clothing items entering the shop daily, so much volume in the sales, and the very, very low prices of the pieces of clothing, how this could be a company that is ethical and produces things in a way where the workers are treated fairly. Well, it's because it allegedly isn't. Think about this logically, right? If there were enough workers hired for the clothes to be made ethically, for them to be paid properly, they would not feasibly be able to charge the prices they do for the clothing itself. $3 t-shirts, $8 swimsuits, different. I'll put a couple of like ads next to me on screen of like really low price things. Also, I don't even understand how people scroll the website. I had actually never been on it ever prior to researching this video. And I was just met with like so much stuff. Like I was like super overstimulated. That's not an actual like nitpick at the ethics of the site or anything like that. I'm just more like man, the designer really all over the place with this one. So people are alleging that the workers from Shein are working in sweatshops. And I'm going to insert this clip from Swoop's video on Shein that kind of outlines this sort of idea of the working conditions that they were placed under.
Doors and didn't see a single emergency exit. In one of the companies, the anonymous researcher secured interviews with 3 employees. Each of them was asked how many hours they worked per day, and they answered very similarly, from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. in the morning, then another shift from 1:30 p.m. to 5:45 p.m., and then another shift in the evening from 7 p.m. to 10 or 10:30 p.m. Now, for those of you who are like me and are just kind of bad at math, let me see. Okay, that's, carry the 1 divided by, yeah, that's almost 12 full hours of work spread across a 14.5-hour block. That's a lot, but it gets worse because they work these shifts every single day, every single week, with only 1 day off per month. One day per month off. That's around 75 work hours per week. Now, I am not admittedly too familiar with Chinese labor laws, but I'm pretty sure it's the same as it was in 2020 when this report came out, because back in 2020, a work week was like an American work week, 40 hours maximum.
This system of labor for the company like Shein is done to produce borderline disposable clothing, whether it falls apart or ends up at the nearest Goodwill due to the rapid trend cycle that's created by a company as this. With the rapid production and rapid set of new designs, Shein has even had to admit in the past that they have not made their own designs for everything, and rather that they take inspiration from other artists. And I'm going to insert a video from Abby Williamson that describes this as well.
Their safety, so many things. Amongst that, there's also like stealing designs. There's questionable designs on their website. Many things that people have talked about Shein for as far as why they're problematic. And I've talked about it too. Also, when it comes to fast fashion, I've talked about this before. I have a very kind of nuanced thoughts about it, because while I would not want to individually demonize people for buying things that are inexpensive because it's all they can afford or it's all they can find in their size, coming from a fat girl who doesn't have a ton of money, I would never want to demonize an individual person for buying stuff that they need.
And this sort of concept of what people can buy, consumerism, and this concept of what's accessible to people brings forth my third and final point of the online discourse, which is class divide. So many accredit Shein's explosion in revenue, popularity, and relevance to the 2020 events and the lockdowns that had occurred. And I think what had happened, especially on social media, at least from this is anecdotal, at least to some extent, this part, many young people became kind of hyper aware of the class divide between themselves and others based on the events that occurred during the lockdown. This, I believe, was contributed from the fact that there was vastly different responses on a governmental level depending on what country you lived in. People in the United States, for example, if I remember correctly, only received 2 $1,200 checks over the course of a year and a half. Given that people were not provided with the necessary resources to properly live, to be honest, during the job shortages and closures, many who needed access to clothing, to goods, started going to websites like Shein in order to be able to dress themselves. The issue was that many of the people who were just trying to access affordable clothing and wanted a new place to shop then became lured by micro-influencers doing these really huge Shein hauls. And it was trying to follow this idea that they could be a part of the trends that they were seeing all of their favorite influencers doing, be trendy like the rich kids at school or your rich friends or whatever, and be able to do so in a way that you can afford. And thus you're then being looped into this hyper-consumerist trend cycle.
Haul, and I got a bunch of stuff, so I'm very happy to show you guys what I got. This is definitely a really cute summer/vacation haul, and everything is so freaking cute. I tried to pick out unique pieces that I haven't seen anyone in before, and I'm really happy with what I got. So before I get into this video, I do want to tell you that I have a code with Shein. It's US Jenna15 for 15% off the entire website, so you can get any of these things that I'm going to show you today, or anything else that you want. Go on a shopping spree. It's summer. Get some cute pieces for yourself, and let's get into the video.
When I was in high school, what was trendy? What was trendy when I was in high school was to beat your face to the gods and wear club outfits to school. But imagine if you could get your $50 or $60 Shade and Light contour palette from SheGlam instead of paying these huge prices, $50-$60, you're paying around $10. Or if you wanted your shirt with the crosses in the front, like the lace in the front, that you don't have to buy it from Aritzia for $70, you can buy it from Shein for $8. So this difference in being able to feel included and involved in the world around you, especially at a time that is so isolating, I feel like became something that was really very endearing for people, and something that they really feel like they could feel less alone in a time of isolation. And I think that that is a factor that contributed to this that a lot of people don't want to talk about. A lot of people just want to say like influencers evil, buying a lot of stuff, people stupid, buy a lot of stuff. And I think that capitalism as a process has kind of taught us to value ourselves as a consumer instead of always to value ourselves as a person. It becomes this thing where you feel left out and unimportant if you can't participate in the consumer patterns that a lot of other people have. And I think Shein gave way to let people do that who were not able to do so prior, and that became something that people found to be something that they really wanted. The other thing is that the people promoting this website went from micro influencers to huge influencers to even A-list celebrities, which I think it was Swoop that mentioned it, that Khloe Kardashian was on some sort of like reality show run by Shein, and they were made to promote these gigantic Shein hauls. We're talking like $300, $400, $500. So you're getting these massive boxes where they could pour out the clothes. They were supposed to pose this as their regular wardrobes, which I believe allegedly a lot of these people were not wearing these pieces more than once or twice after the haul. Over time, with the environmental and workplace conditions being shown, along with this kind of idea of the class difference and understanding where people are economically and socially, and how Shein contributes to this sort of fitting the molds that a lot of people desire to do, this kind of pushes the marketing that Shein needs to do in order to combat these three major factors over the edge. And this gets us into part 2, Shein Factory Propaganda Tour. Shein invited a group of influencers to China, to this supposed Shein factory / design center type innovation center place, where it was really just an alleged PR move on behalf of Shein. I'm not going to use a supercharged word like propaganda without outlining directly what I mean by this in this circumstance. I'm going to use this book called How Fascism Works by Jason Stanley in order to outline my definition of propaganda in this specific context. It's hard to advance a policy that will harm a large group of people in straightforward terms. The role of political propaganda is to conceal politicians or political movements' clearly problematic goals by masking them with ideals that are widely accepted. A dangerous, destabilizing war for power becomes a war whose aim is stability, or a war whose aim is freedom. Political propaganda uses the language of virtuous ideals to unite people behind otherwise objectable ends. Just as fascist politics attacks the rule of law in the name of anti-corruption, it also purports to protect freedom and individual liberties. But these liberties are contingent on the oppression of some groups. On July 5th, 1852, the American abolitionist and orator Frederick Douglass delivered a 4th of July oration in honor of that year's Independence Day. Douglass begins his remarks by acknowledging the day and celebrates political freedom. This, for the purpose of the celebration, is the 4th of July. It is the birthday of your national independence and your political freedom. This, to you, is what Passover was to the emancipated people of God. Douglass spends the first part of his speech lauding the Founding Fathers' commitment to the cause of liberty and praising the day as a celebration of ideal freedom. But then, turning to the present moment, Douglass, who was formerly enslaved, asks, to drag a man in fetters into the grand illuminated temple of liberty, and called upon him to join you in joyous anthems, were inhuman mockery and sacrilegious irony. Do you mean, citizens, to mock me by asking me to speak today? So essentially what this excerpt is doing is it's describing that the concept of freedom and the concept of being able to live as pleasant of a life as possible under the guise of some sort of other political or economic movement is actually typically just a disguise for something else. And I think that Shein proposing itself as this accessible, inexpensive marketplace where everyone is just good vibes, and Shein does philanthropy and environmental practices and et cetera, that it's disguising itself as something that it's not, allegedly. And it has done so through the voice of, instead of politicians in this circumstance, influencers on this brand trip. This concept of sacrificing the life of others for luxury or the luxuries of a few is a pretty pivotal piece of how capitalism functions. In late-stage capitalism, it is no longer, creating solid gold pieces for a monarch. Rather, it is allowing people to spend copious amount of money on product that is desirable to them, as long as it means that they're able to get volume and they're able to be to conform to those around them as much as possible. There's actually this short story that I teach a lot of my students when I would do like private teaching, called The Ones That Walk Away from Omelis, which was a text by Ursula Le Guin, where Omelis is a town that is presented as this sort of utopian society with no flaws, stating that the only struggles that happen in Omelis are those that are intellectual. All the evil and sadness and, crime, homelessness, all those types of things are essentially focused and dealt with by the suffering of this one small child who is locked in a basement closet, essentially, in this kind of like small cellar. And those that live in Omelis must, at least once in their life, go and visit the small child who is suffering to see how they're able to achieve their utopia. From that point, they are able to decide whether they will stay in the utopia under the sacrifice of this child, or if they will walk away from Omelis and go somewhere else. Now, some may ask why I brought up The Ones That Walk Away from Omelis. It's because the main lesson that Le Guin is trying to tell us is how easily we're able to put forward our own desires and luxury over those who sacrifice themselves for it, even if it is put immediately in front of your face. Le Guin says in this text that very few are able to or are willing to leave, and there are very few who do leave, even when faced directly with the concept that they are having all of their suffering offloaded onto somebody else. But the life of luxury is so pleasing to them that they would rather take that than challenge things directly. So put a pin in the propaganda definition and the concepts I just explained from The Ones That Walk Away from Omelis, and let's think about the brand trip in this context. So for those of you who are wondering, I will insert a TikTok or two about what happened just to quickly catch you up. I don't have access to the original videos by, particularly by Danny DMC, because as I've said before on this channel, the TikTok girlies are sneaky deleters.
Hosted an influencers trip at a factory in China, and it's the biggest load of propaganda crap.
Excited and impressed to see the working conditions. The next day, we headed to the Shein Innovation Center. This facility blew my mind. It's over 600,000 square feet. There's so much technology, and Shein is just such a developed and complex company, and it was so beautiful to see firsthand. I was able to interview a woman that worked in the fabric cutting department, and you guys know me. She's an investigative journalist, so I asked her all of our questions, and she answered them honestly and authentically. She was very surprised at all the rumors that have been spread in the US.
I'm sorry, did this influencer just say the rumours? The fact that the garment workers are forced to work 17-hour days and their docked pay for the garment is imperfect, a vicious rumour. It gets worse.
I think my biggest takeaway from this trip is to be an independent thinker, get the facts and see it with your own two eyes. There's a narrative fed to us in the US, and I'm one that always likes to be open-minded and seek the truth, so I'm grateful for that about myself, and I hope the same for you.
Just ignoring for a second the fact that this influencer's obviously been paid to say these things. I feel as if she's almost gaslighting the viewer, because ultimately she's saying if you believe this narrative, these rumours, then you're not an independent thinker, you're just believing the rumours. It really grinds my gears, but she clearly made a bag, so...
One of the main conversations that's been happening on the social media platforms is this concept of Danny DMC calling herself an investigative journalist and going into Shein and asking all the tough questions to them. I want to go on a slight tangent again for a second to describe kind of my grievances with these statements beyond just the common, like, you can't just call yourself a journalist. Some may not agree with me, but Danny referring to themselves as an investigative journalist, I believe that a lot of this is because of how internet culture has redefined the concept of journalism, essayists, etc., where people can be documentarians or journalists by just producing their own content on social media that has what they deemed a proper amount of research. To make my frustration super short, because I go on these rants with my friends in real life all the time, I've hated how the internet has devolved arts education into this flagrant thing that you can just do by looking up shit on Google. I've had people call themselves philosophers because they have spent hundreds of hours reading things online with no guidance on the writing practices, the derivatives practices, or these more complex factors of the art. And I'm not saying that it doesn't have value to teach yourself anything. But what I'm saying is that education in a more complex form and guidance in a more complex form exists for a reason. And the reason why, it's because you get people like this who don't follow any journalistic practices, have never learned the discipline, have never learned ethics, and are just calling themselves journalists on the name of looking into something and thinking that that is the full encompassing requirements to do this work. What I'm saying is that you would never let someone call themselves a doctor because they spend hours looking up stuff on WebMD, right? Or you never let someone call themselves a lawyer because they've read the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And I think that people have devolved a lot of facets of education under this guise that they can just figure it out themselves. And while not to devalue this kind of thoughtfulness, it's also, there is standards that exist, and there is you need to be challenged on your skill. And when you're looking up stuff on your own and you're just doing stuff on your own, you're not going to be challenged by someone who's a professional in the practice. And I fully understand that education is expensive and not accessible. Looking at things like this yourself and critically analyzing things is amazing, and I wish for you to do it. However, I'm saying in this circumstance, this does not grant you the ability to call yourself a journalist. And I think people are overinflating their own egos in contrast to the actual aspects of professionalism that exist in these fields. Shein, I believe, understands this sort of cognitive dissonance and take advantage of it, allegedly, which is why they brought the influencers in. People are aware that corporations have ulterior motives to make profits first. That's always what it's going to be. And I think they took people and had them analyze things and talk to people who worked there in order to kind of hope that they would make some sort of internet piece that would be seen viable despite the obvious flaws and biases that are present, just for the sake of promoting the company. Now, I've stated before in a recent video that I believe that every argument has a bias, and I still stand by that as a process. However, it's the amount of bias present that could thus dilute your argument and make it no longer truly valid. And when you're being paid by the people that you're trying to defend, and we're invited to this fun trip and shown this allegedly fake working environment, then your motives are not going to align with the professionalism and requirements to actually thoroughly look into these things. So these influencers were brought to the Shein Innovation Center, where the influencers were claiming that this represented the entire production process, which again doesn't make sense given that the warehouse was almost empty. And regardless, it should be painfully obvious, even if that warehouse was filled to the brim with workers, that one warehouse alone in that particular place would not be able to house or produce the amount of product that Shein puts out on a regular basis. Shein allegedly, through the influencers allegedly again, twisted this argument of the poor working conditions that are present in the factories and the workplace in general to this sort of narrative of racism. This is regardless of the images, news articles, interviews, statements, documentaries, etc., that suggest otherwise.
Excuse that most of us do have clothes made from unethical companies.
I'm not the one. So here's the deal, okay? One, stop telling me to myself. Okay. Second, I know exactly who I am. I know exactly what I'm doing. Third, could never, will never be a sellout ever in life. I was not paid for any trip or to say anything. I have so much more awareness of what's going on behind the scenes than any of you ever could, because you don't see what's going on. 90% of what's in your closet is made in horrible conditions. So you have no right to say anything. Second, I've seen stuff with my own two eyes. If you think it's propaganda, that's cool. Again, you've never been to China and you've never seen what's going on. There is so much xenophobia with everything you guys are saying, and that's what I really learned in China. We are fed propaganda. We are fed a whole narrative in the US about Chinese people and Chinese culture. And that China trip honestly changed my life. Like I said, I'm not the one. I know who I am. I know exactly what I'm doing. And to be a pioneer, you got to take a lot of time. So it is what it is.
And I want to say too that this argument is a little bit ridiculous, because while I understand the racial prejudices that exist against Chinese people and Chinese business owners and things that are made in China, because Westerners often consider them to be cheap and not worthy of being produced, at the same time, it's obvious to most that sweatshop labor exists not just in China, and just because it exists in China doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be bad. and that a lot of textiles and high quality pieces are produced in China, mostly because of the availability of production, product, etc. Lots of really good makeup is made in China, lots of really good clothing, lots of really good products are designed and made in China. This is regardless of the working conditions of other places such as Shein. What I'm saying is I'm highlighting that these discrepancies because it is obvious that Shein is putting forward a response through the mouths of other people, allegedly again. So now that we've discussed labor practices and narratives that are present around them, I want to move on to the last part of the video, which I have just titled Part 3, There is No Ethical Consumption Under Capitalism. So when we're talking about the influencers and their responses, Danny DMC says that anybody would do it for a bag, and Shein really brought this kind of kind nature in allowing influencers that are not normally invited on trips to these trips because it's hard for plus size women to be able to get brand deals, etc. And I understand that to be true. But I also believe that Shein understands that to be true, and Shein thus took advantage of this fact, and as they have allegedly done so before by focusing on micro-influencers, because there is a level of trustworthiness prior to the point in which people deem someone as a sellout. And given the less ideal reputation that Shein has on a large scale, they tend to focus on working with those small influencers and giving them large payouts in comparison to the size of their following. And because of the loyalty, the ratio between those who view and those who buy is typically much higher than that of a typical advertisement, and far less cost, right? People discuss how billboards can cost tens of thousands of dollars. I'm sure that a lot of these people, these really tiny influencers that were getting Shein payouts, it was like $500, $300, $200, that kind of thing. Allegedly, again, this is just my opinion, the amounts specifically allotted to them. But what I'm saying is a lot of these people would be paid above rate. And I say this because even from my Temu offers, and I've had offers from other fast fashion companies, there's always a specific, a suspiciously high payout for the content that they want me to produce. And this also brings forth this trend of haul videos where people sometimes just think that people are buying this stuff on their own, which then makes it feel acceptable to overconsume themselves. As you can see, Danny's "you would do it too" mentality highlights this fact that Shein kind of feeds in and looks for this sort of desperation in people. And I'm not trying to just say like, oh, they only did it because they're desperate and they're stupid. That's not true. What I'm saying is Shein also understands that class divide and also understands that sort of concept of wanting to be like a real influencer, wanting to be like a real rich person and taking advantage of that themselves. Again, allegedly. Because the issue is, in which a lot of these influencers argue, is that there are some good things about Shein. They're undeniably affordable. They ship everywhere and are easily accessible. They are also size inclusive, with many of the pieces going up to a size 4X. And the styles are also trendy and up to date, which is a particular issue with the plus size community. There's a whole genre of videos on TikTok that are just based on roasting plus size fashion online because of how bad it typically is. And I'll put one of those in now.
Why does every plus size section one go to has ugly clothes? Do better, Coles. This is not it. You SBBWS want to look cute too.
One influencer who I've seen also get a ton of flack for promoting Shein is influencer Drew Afualo. Now, Drew Afualo is somebody who is very divisive in many communities, given her approach to talking about men and misogyny on the TikTok platform. I am not here to talk about the morality of Drew Afualo and how that functions as a whole. Rather, I want to discuss her partnership and her response. But again, sneaky deleted, so I had to watch kind of recap TikToks that had little clips of her response in order to actually get it. And I will insert one of those TikToks right now.
I'm unfollowing Drew, and I take no pleasure in this, but I feared that this day would come.
I'm gonna try on haul, babes, because I've partnered with Shein, and we've got a lot, so we're gonna rapid fire, babes.
I'm not usually one for cancel culture, but it's the blatant lack of accountability in her comment section that really disappointed me. Let's talk about why she's wrong. This comment that she's cheering on, not everyone can afford ethical things, a lot of companies don't make inclusive sizes, check your privilege. We should never shame anybody for shopping within their budget. Drew is not one of those people. She can afford ethically sourced things. I'm tired of rich people using poor people's excuses to justify their unethical lives. I get this comment a lot myself. Oh, you're such a hypocrite for talking about shopping ethically while you have an iPhone. Are you serious? You're comparing my phone, which I use for work, which I use to contact my loved ones that live thousands of miles away from me, to a Shein haul. Let's not shame people for using phones, which are pretty much necessary to live in the modern day. Shein hauls aren't, though. Here she says, if you can afford to shop sustainably, good for you. You're one of those people, Drew. You're one of those people who can. I see the point around size inclusivity. I know that sustainable fashion has a long way to go before it's fully size inclusive. I will say though, most plus size women already know about Shein. They don't need you to be cashing a cute little check from Shein to promote them even more. Yes, you deserve to dress cute. And women of the global south deserve to eat. They deserve to save up for their children to send them to school. They deserve to work in a factory that won't collapse on them, which might arguably be a little bit more important than dressing cute. I used to say this, now I hate this. This is a cop-out. This is basically saying that all companies under the sun are equally as bad, so we should all stop giving a fuck. Sustainability in all aspects is about making the best choices out of the options available to you. There's always a lesser evil. You're out here saying you support women, but really you only support women in the global north that are rich and can use your Shein code, right? As an influencer, you are actively profiting off of the women of color that Shein enslaves. And that's what makes you different from somebody who's just shopping Shein because they can't afford something else. You're promoting them. You are making money from these women. Your feminism is performative, and that BLM in your bio.
Here again is another example of Shein using marketing to address controversy, because Drew talks about in one of her videos, one of the clips I had seen, about this sort of Shein using designers from like having like actual like small artists do designs. This is to combat the allegations regarding these stolen designs, despite the fact that, again, I can doubt that they would hire enough artists to produce 6,000 pieces a day, 10,000 pieces a day, etc., allegedly. And this approaching controversy and managing controversy on behalf of a company is again something that doesn't sit right with me. And this is not saying that I like hate Danny DMC and Drew Fall. I don't care. But I can still combat and push back on the responses they did and the structures in which they did so. No one here on the Mika's Rhetoric channel is saying that people who buy from Shein are evil. Okay? The issue is working as a mouthpiece on behalf of a corporation to dissolve narratives that less fortunate people use in order to not feel so guilty about the overconsumption and environmental impacts that these large companies bring to the earth. Many cannot afford ethical plus-size clothing that is stylish and pleasant to wear, and everyone deserves to have that. And even straight-size people, I know a lot of straight-size people who use Shein as well for the same reasons. It's because of the accessibility, affordability, how they can get it to their house if they don't have time to go shopping, etc. And I think, again, that is very fair to the people that need to access it. However, these wealthy people do not need to access it, nor are they like objectively accessing it. Let's think of somebody like Tana Mojo. Tana Mojo might have a little Shein haul type deal. I don't know if she ever has one. I'm just using her as an example. But you know she's going to wear Louis when she goes out. Like, you're not going to be caught dead in the club in a $10 dress when you're, you know, a millionaire. There are a couple of instances where somebody might not be like that, but it's fleetingly rare. What issue I've been having with the influencer responses is this concept of twisting the narrative people use in order to not feel so horrible about the earth exploding because 100 companies don't have their shit together, again, allegedly. They have this message of why not shop at Shein because there's no ethical consumption under capitalism anyways. While true, there's also such thing as irresponsible overconsumption no matter the individual. Especially when you're objectively wealthy and you clearly are able to wear garments that are ethically sourced and are made in better conditions, and it's pretty clear that you're not going to get use out of the garment. Because no matter how many of these like Shein hauls I've seen from these bigger influencers, I never see them wear the pieces again. And is that not strange to anybody else? Because those who are low income, who are ordering from places like Shein, are like washing the shirts and then like hanging them or laying them flat to dry, are like or sometimes often repatching the pieces, repairing things. Like, I know so many people who have fast fashion pieces that they put so much care and love into because that is genuinely all that they can access. It's not a moment or it's not a set of circumstances in which like they're just getting things that they want. They're getting things that they need. And sometimes they have to get it from these more affordable sites, especially as the prices of living are raising and the wages are not. People have to resort to different ways of accessing the things they need. You can't just walk around with no clothes. That's literally against the law. But this saying of that there's no ethical consumption under capitalism is designed for low-income people to not kind of feel the brunt nature of these abusive corporations and feel personally responsible. But now those very corporations are using puppets of influencers to manipulate this narrative and separate themselves from their own actions. To round out all of this angry rant, I simply plead for you to be careful with who you idolize, whether that be influencers, individuals, companies, etc. Just understand your piece and everything, what your limitations are. Be conscious about consumption. Be conscious about what you are and are not able to access, because a lot of people just say things like thrifting are the solution, and that is not true. I'm not even plus size. I'm just built like a fridge. And I remember once I ripped the ass of my pants. Like, it blew out, okay? And I went to like 3 different thrift stores, and I think I tried on like 20 plus pairs of pants. 1 pair fit me at the end of the day. So assuming that someone can just go to the thrift and that will solve all the problems is not, because then you can go into the Depop girly argument, and that's a whole other video. Just be conscious of where you are in your placement, what you can and can't afford, what you can and cannot access. Don't bully people for what they can and cannot access. Be conscious of your own overconsumption, because if you're a huge influencer and you're spending $300 on Shein just to throw it all out, or you're not even spending it, you're getting a free $300 gift card from Shein to promote their shit, and then you're just blowing everything off under this concept of ethical consumption when you're contributing, or you're a part of contributing to their own message to have this blatant overproduction and overconsumption under the name of like being silly and buying stuff, like, check yourself. That's all I gotta say about that. To conclude, it's incredibly important for people to be able to tackle the moral dilemmas around their own consumption. And I just invite you to look upon the sources down below. I have, all the sources on Shein, the books that I put in the lists and everything like that. And I'll try to link a couple of useful resources around consumption and our habits on consumption. Links, sources, ways to support the channel, all down below, including an email to contact me for more sponsorships, which is so funny after like this whole video. I'm just kidding about the sponsor thing. It's actually to contact me to suggest longer form content. I might not answer the emails, but I read them all because sometimes I'm just lazy. I just want to thank Scentbird again for sponsoring this video. Make sure to use code Mika for 55% off of your first month at Scentbird. All the information you need is in the description as well as the pinned comment. And I always really appreciate sponsors on the channel because it helps make these really adventurous long videos possible. So thank you again, and everything you need down below. And I want to thank my members and patrons and anybody for getting to this point and for listening to this really long video, because I just feel like I wanted to be based and commie pilled. I'm just kidding. Just based in anti-consumerism pilled. Yeah, that'll do. All right. Hope you have an amazing day, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye.
Harry and Obama. Is that a conspiracy? What is that? That one I must read.